How do nations really project influence today? I mean, it's clearly not just about tanks or trade deals anymore, is it?
No, definitely not. The landscape's shifted. Power is, well, it's more subtle now in many ways.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at something quite specific, China's think tank diplomacy. Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to try and unpack how China uses this network of research institutions, policy forums to, shape minds and influence policy, particularly in Africa.
Right, it's about how they're quietly but very strategically using ideas to expand their global footprint.
And we want to understand what this actually means for African nations on the ground. What are the implications for you, the listener, trying to make sense of these global shifts?
Exactly, and just for context, this discussion is grounded in recent analyses and reports looking specifically at this strategy. It's not just guesswork. It's based on observable trends.
Okay, so China is a major economic and military player. Why the need for this softer approach? What's missing if they just stick to the traditional tools, especially as they aim to be a leader for the global south?
That's the core question, really. The sources we looked at suggest China gets that raw power isn't the whole story in today's world. It doesn't automatically grant you the kind of, let's say, legitimacy or deep influence they seem to want.
So it's about hearts and minds.
It is, yeah. Winning hearts and minds. It requires that mix of diplomacy, sure, but also this soft power element. It's about making their system, their ideas seem attractive, maybe even preferable.
So defining terms then, think tank diplomacy, what are we actually talking about?
Think of it as China strategically using its think tanks, its universities, its policy forums, not just for research, but as tools to actively push its worldview and influence foreign relations. It's instrumentalizing knowledge, you could say.
Right, it's deliberate.
Very deliberate. And it has top-level backing. President Xi Jinping, back in 2022, specifically called for developing academic and discourse systems rooted in Chinese traditions.
So a clear signal from the top.
Absolutely. It's a strategic directive. This isn't just about making China look good, although that's part of it.
Okay, so what is the bigger objective then, if not just PR?
It's about projecting China's worldview, its governance model, its development ideas as, well, credible alternatives. Alternatives to the Western liberal norms that have dominated for decades.
They're essentially trying to offer a different path.
Precisely. Especially for developing nations. They're positioning their model as a viable, maybe even superior way to achieve modernization and stability. It's a challenge to the existing global order, fundamentally.
Okay, that's the big picture strategy. How does this translate on the ground, say, in Africa? What are the mechanisms?
Well, a prime example is the China-Africa Think Tank Forum, CATTF.
Yeah.
It was formally launched way back in October 2011. Yeah, it brought together delegates from, I think, 27 African countries initially. And the idea was to create this permanent platform.
For what purpose, officially?
Officially, it's about, fostering mutual understanding, promoting dialogue, civil participation, generating policy ideas for Sino-African cooperation. Pretty standard stuff on paper.
And I assume they focus on specific areas.
They do. Key areas like peace and security, finance, investment, cultural exchange, the big pillars of the relationship. And since Xi Jinping took over in 2013, these kinds of initiatives have really expanded.
So it's not just CETTF?
No, not at all. There were other networks, too, linked to things like the Belt and Road Initiative or the Global Community of Shared Futures concept. It's a whole ecosystem of influence.
And who runs these networks? Is it independent academics driving this?
That's a key point. Mostly no. They're primarily coordinated by state-affiliated institutions. Think the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, People's Daily, CGTN, Xinhua News Agency, essentially arms of the state working with international partners.
Right.
This whole approach, engaging with media, think tanks, academia, business, it's often called Track 2 diplomacy.
Track 2. Explain that quickly.
It just means engaging outside the official government-to-government channels. It's like a back channel for spreading ideas, building relationships beyond formal diplomacy. Beijing uses it to, boost its image, get its narrative out there, seem like a supporter of multilateralism and free trade.
Got it.
Yeah.
So let's make this concrete. There was a recent CATTF meeting, right? The 14th one in Kunming, May 2025.
That's right. Over 100 delegates were there. The theme was quite telling. China, Africa, governance, experience and exchanges, and Chinese modernization.
And what came out of it? Any big declarations?
Yeah, they endorsed something called the Kunming Consensus, basically an agreement to deepen cooperation on governance, development, and crucially, link Chinese modernization with Africa's own development plans.
Interesting. And I heard there were field trips involved.
There were. A 3-day tour across Yunnan province for the delegates. The idea was to showcase China's multifaceted modernization, rural projects, green initiatives, tech innovation, community governance. Basically, look how well our model works.
A guided tour of success, perhaps. Which makes you wonder how much space is there for African delegates to say, well, our experience is different, or even offer critiques?
That's a really important question, and it touches on some of the criticisms we need to discuss. But first, the timing of this Kunming meeting is significant, too.
How so?
It came right after the 2024 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC. And FOCAC is, China's main stage for engaging with Africa multilaterally.
Right. FOCAC sets the big picture. What was the message from Xi Jinping at that 2024 summit?
He laid out 6 pillars for the China-Africa partnership focused on modernization, and a whole blueprint for what he calls an all-weather China-Africa community with a shared future. Very ambitious language.
And the action plan from FOCAC, did it connect to these broader global ideas China promotes?
Absolutely. It prioritizes 3 of Xi's big global initiatives: the Global Development Initiative, GDI, the Global Security Initiative, GSI, and the Global Civilization Initiative, GCI.
Okay, let's quickly break those down. GDI.
Focused on shared prosperity, poverty reduction, development cooperation,
Then the PSI.
promoting cooperative security, rejecting sort of Cold War alliances, proposing China's approach to global security challenges,
That GCI.
emphasizing respect for diverse civilizations,
Yeah.
pushing back against the idea of universal values, promoting China's cultural narrative.
So this GDI, GSI, GCI, this trifecta, it's the foundation for China's alternative vision for how the world should work.
That's exactly it. They underpin this vision for different global norms, different governance models.
And connecting this back to think tank diplomacy, these forums, these exchanges, are partly about getting African buy-in for these initiatives, right?
Yeah.
Building support.
Yes. And there's an expectation, quite clearly stated sometimes, that this engagement, this support, should translate into diplomatic backing for China at the UN in other international bodies. It's transactional to a degree.
Okay, let's flip the coin then. We see China's strategy. What about the African perspective? Are there real benefits for African countries engaging in this?
There certainly can be. The sources acknowledge that. This diplomacy does give African countries access to different development ideas, potentially useful ones. And China invests significantly in research cooperation, scholarships, training. Tangible benefit.
Well, it's always a but, isn't there?
There is. The big concern revolves around this heavy emphasis on the Chinese solution. How applicable is a model developed in China's specific context to, say, 50-plus incredibly diverse African nations?
Yeah, that seems like a huge question.
It is. And then there's the question of China's own interests. They're not promoting this model out of pure altruism, are they?
So how open are these forums, really? Is it genuine mutual learning or more like indoctrination?
That's the critical assessment emerging from some analyses. While the language is always about mutual learning and dialogue, many observers note these events are often very carefully orchestrated by China's state apparatus.
Meaning
There might be limited room for real, open debate, for challenging questions, for critical evaluation of China's model or its impact in Africa. It can feel more like a presentation than a discussion.
So it's not quite an equal exchange of ideas.
It risks becoming an asymmetrical exchange, as one report put it. That can stifle real intellectual dialogue, limit policy innovation that might come from genuine back and forth.
And there's a tendency to present a perfect picture.
Yes, often an idealized view of Chinese culture, and importantly, pushing the idea that the one-party system is a key reason for China's success and a viable option for others.
So for African countries navigating this, the challenge isn't about whether to engage with China. That ship has sailed, hasn't it?
Exactly. Engagement is happening. The challenge is how to engage. It requires, as the analyses suggest, real discernment, strategic foresight. Don't just accept the narrative wholesale.
It comes back to ownership then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sustainable development for Africa isn't going to come from copy-pasting any external model, whether it's Chinese or Western. The sources emphasize the need for African-led solutions.
Solutions rooted in the continent's own realities.
Its own diverse histories, cultures, and, importantly, its own aspirations for the future.
Okay. So, China's think tank diplomacy. clearly sophisticated, strategic, offers some benefits, but also raises serious questions about influence, reciprocity, and the space for independent thought.
It's a complex picture, definitely. No easy answers.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. In this world where big powers are all pushing their own models, their own systems, how can any country, especially in the global south, carve out a truly independent path?
Yeah, a path that respects its own history, its own context, its own goals.
What does genuine partnership look like in that kind of environment? What does it demand from everyone involved? Something to think about.